Hi, everyone. Welcome. We'll be getting started in just another minute. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, letting us know where you're located. Hello, Raleigh, Birmingham, Madison, Clearwater, San Francisco, Charleston, White Plains, Pittsburgh, London, New Paltz, Memphis, Sarasota, Brooklyn, Spain, Denver, New York, Cleveland. So good to see so many of you with us today. Thanks for joining. So hi, everyone, and welcome. We are so glad that you are with us today. I need to start our program today first by introducing myself. My name is Rabbi Melanie Levav. I'm located in New York City, and I have the honor of serving as the executive director of Shomer Collective. And I need to start our program today by acknowledging the moment that we are in this year, our second collective convening. Israel is at war in response to the horrifying acts committed by Hamas just over 1 week ago, representing the deadliest day for the Jewish people since World War II. I'll speak more about this in just a few minutes. Shomer Collective's work is about bringing Jewish wisdom to bear on end of life. We do not do this work alone. Thank you to each of the funders who have already partnered with Shomer in launching our work into the Jewish communal scene nationally and locally. And thank you to each of the prospective funders who have come today in recognition of the potential to create lasting change. Our planning committee has been an essential part of getting us to today, and we are so grateful for your partnership. Shomer Collective was founded from the realization that too many of us in our communities end up in crisis because we don't talk about and don't plan enough for end of life. And the realization that Jewish tradition has so much to offer. We host this convening for professionals and lay leaders who work at the intersection of Jewish life and end of life because we see the opportunity to create and strengthen connections across disciplines to build a field of Jewish end-of-life care and conversations that includes each of the many roles you all represent. It's incredible to see how far and wide word spread about our work in today's convening. We are thrilled that more than 400 of you registered in advance from at least 37 states and 4 countries, and a huge variety of backgrounds, including rabbis, chaplains, nurses, mental health professionals, foundation professionals, doctors, funeral directors, mortuary staff, cemetery directors, federation professionals, Jewish educators, end-of-life doulas, attorneys, Chevra Kadisha members, lay leaders. You all come from more than 200 organizations. We convene in this first week of the Jewish month of Cheshvan on the Hebrew calendar, a month without holidays, with the idea of doing it in this time to bring the themes of the high holidays, the questions of who will live and who will die, Yom Kippur's dress rehearsal for death, to bring those themes into our work throughout the rest of the year. A word about the image of the braid on our convening materials. The strands of our braid are meant to represent the 3 stages in our collective work: prepare, transition, mourn. The preparation for end of life, the transition between life and death, and the mourning. There's a Jewish teaching that originates in the book of Ecclesiastes that says a 3-strand cord is not easily broken, which feels particularly poignant today as we reflect on past, present, and future. For those of you new to Shomer Collective, a brief word about our work and our name. The word Shomer means guard in Hebrew. A Shomer guards the body of the deceased from the time of death until the time of burial, and is the first person who has the honor of accompanying the soul on the beginning of its journey of separation from the body. So too, Shomer Collective aims to provide sacred accompaniment on this journey of confronting our mortality to live lives of greater meaning and connection. The collective part of our name refers to the recognition that we're in this together, friends, that the collective work we do and the ways we all come together is what will make the difference. Shomer is honored to serve as the convener of today's gathering. Our mission is to improve end-of-life experiences for individuals and their families inspired by Jewish wisdom, values, and practices. And we do this by curating content and resources and building a diverse network of organizational partners. We envision a world where end-of-life matters are spoken about openly, thoughtfully, frequently, creating opportunities for many more people to engage with Jewish wisdom, values, and practices. This work doesn't happen without each of you who are out there in your own communities doing the work, and we thank you. There are many ways you can get involved in our collective work and share the work with the people you serve. What you see on the screen is just a sample of our signature offerings. And so moving into our time together today, our intentions are as follows. First, to ground our time in the Jewish wisdom that supports our holy work and to recognize that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. Next is to connect to other professionals and lay leaders who are doing this sacred work alongside us. Our aspirations, first, presence. Show up, be here now. If you're here, try not to be elsewhere for our abbreviated time together. Kindness, and all voices are welcome. In our breakout rooms in the second half of our program, make space for others to speak after you've spoken. Think about what you want to share in the chat so that we can hear your voice as part of our conversation. As a reminder, here's some of the logistics of today's gathering. If you need help with any of them, please chat Victoria Mapson. And so here's today's agenda, how we're going to spend our time together. I'm going to offer a teaching to preview some resources we'll share in our follow-up for you to use in your own work. And then our keynote experience will be Rabbi Adam Lavitt, who will lead us in a creative experiential journey and breakouts. We'll come back together briefly to conclude our time together. We are so grateful to our partners who were originally scheduled to present at today's convening. 9 of them were to have presented, representing so many bright spots in our growing field. We've set that piece aside for today to be able to speak at greater length to the needs of the moment, and we'll be rescheduling that piece in the coming months, along with the possibility of our local meetups that have been postponed. So stay tuned for more information about that. I want to thank Rabbi Shlomo Brody, who is one of our dear partners and was one of the partners scheduled to speak briefly today, for reaching out as we shared with our partners how we were thinking about adjusting the program to offer a voice from a colleague who sits in Israel about the changed realities of our shared work today. Rabbi Shlomo Brody is the executive director of Amatai, a vital partner organization of Shomer Collective. Amatai, which is formerly known as the Halachic Organ Donor Society, asks the question from the famous adage, if not now, when? And offers guidance and resources for healthcare decision-making in accordance with Jewish law. Rabbi Brody's career has focused on making Jewish texts accessible to broader audiences while applying them to contemporary social and ethical dilemmas. His writings have been cited in Israeli Supreme Court decisions, and he is published in numerous places. His first book on contemporary debates within Jewish law received the National Jewish Book Award, and his next book, Judaism Confronts War, Jewish Military Ethics for the 21st Century, is scheduled to be published in both Hebrew and English in early 2024. We'll put a fuller bio in the chat, and I invite you to read it, but I'm going to turn things over to Rabbi Brody for a few minutes to ground us with a voice from Israel today. Thank you, Rabbi Brody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabbi Melanie. Thank you, Samantha, for your leadership and your partnership and your friendship. And I really just am honored to give a little bit of a perspective here from Israel with a focus particularly on ritual and how that's impacted us and affected us as we deal with the situation. I also want to apologize that we do have sirens occasionally going off here. And if I run out, just move on without me. So the last Saturday, as you know, it was Shabbat and Simchat Torah and Shemini Atzeret all together in Israel, which meant that we were reciting Yizkor that day on the same day as Simchat Torah. My mother-in-law, who comes from America, and myself are both reciting Yizkor. We don't really love the combination of all the dancing with Yizkor on the same day, and so we decided to make a private minyan in my backyard. And we're expecting about 50 people. At 7 a.m., we were setting up the room, and we could just hear blasts in the sky. I happened to have had a live organ donation consultation case going on at that time, and I had to go on my phone anyway, which I normally don't do on Shabbat, but I had to do that for consultation purposes anyway. And so I quickly realized that something unusual was going on in Israel from the news. And to make a long story short, we davened that day with literally bombs blasting in the air. You can really hear it from quite a far away. We only had a siren at the end of the services, actually. But when we got to Yisker, I realized at that moment that there were many Jews who were being killed at that moment when we were saying Yisker. And so when we started saying the prayers for the state of Israel and the prayers for Israeli Defense Forces and prayers for captives, we had no idea at that moment how extensive the damage and the atrocities were. But it was a striking moment for me as I recited my own private Yizkor, and as the community recited a public memorial prayer, how we understood that somehow life was going to be different. Something was changed. And by the time we said next Yizkor, things would be very changed. Of course, at that moment, when we were reciting Yizkor, I had no idea how different the world will look in the coming days. And I want to mention a couple of rituals which for our professional work, which I think have been particularly strong and provoking here in Israel. Rabbi Melanie, I think we discussed the concept of aninut, this period that we have in Jewish law when one has death but hasn't begun the mourning process because there hasn't been a burial. Well, aninut in Israel has been quite complicated over the last 9 days because the status of so many people has been unclear. And one of the striking and sad phenomenon is that you see so many people who are what we call in Hebrew in Suffolk aninut. They're not sure what the status of their loved ones. And this had to do with the state of bodies. This had to do with the question of who was taken captive into Gaza and who wasn't. But one of the striking and sad things that I've seen on many different occasions is families struggling with the fact they don't know what zone they're in this process. And that period of doubt has made me appreciate all the more so the normal circumstances of life, of course, when we do have greater clarity on death and we have this period. And one of the things I'm thinking about, and I hope we can explore over time in conversations, is to try to develop further the value and meaning of aninut, because as I've seen this past week, when people are in this zone where they have doubts, where they don't know the fate of their loved one, it causes a tremendous amount of angst in all sorts of different ways. And I think we need to think together about how we can develop this idea of aninut as a meaningful time period before burial. The second element of ritual, which I want to mention, is the Shiva calls, and particularly Shiva calls for people you've never met before. Now, in Israel, usually when there's a terror victim or someone else, their houses are flooded with strangers and people, and they come in and walk in for a minute or two, but there's so many people around, you don't really have much opportunity to talk. Well, there's so many mourners right now and so many Shiva houses all over the country that you can show up at a place and suddenly you're the only person who's there. And you have to have that moment where you're interacting with someone which you've never met before. And you're coming partly to comfort them, but also, frankly, to get comfort yourself. And so learning, maybe relearning the skills of how to make a Shiva call and how to understand that you're not supposed to speak until you're spoken to and what to say and what not to say is something which is a skill set, which I think many Israelis have learned on the run this week, but something that we can all think about and we can apply to our teachings in general to others. I know I've had many inspiring Shiva calls this week. We had about 14 Shivas in Modi'in alone where I live, and many others around the country. It's really, but it's been tremendous to see how Israelis come of all different stripes, totally different backgrounds. We had a lot going on in Israel previously, but somehow be able to come together quickly and pay Shiva calls to each other. And the final factor I want to mention from the ritual that we see in Israel is the amount of what we call usually chesed, of good deeds that people are doing in Israel for each other today as a form of coping. And I want to explain to you what I mean by that. There are two types of people in Israel right now. There are soldiers, evacuees, families that are mourning, as one group, the people that are directly impacted in an acute way by the situation. And there's everyone else who's somehow trying to figure out how to help the first group of people. And I don't exaggerate when I say that. The amount of volunteering, the amount of people that are driving 3 hours to bring a cell phone battery to someone, to bring food, to barbecue, to buy underwear, to buy socks. It's unbelievable. My 16-year-old son went one day to volunteer in 4 different places. He literally couldn't have anything to do because there's so many people who are there. And I want to stress this point because I think that sometimes we overlook the ability of chesed, of helping the other as a coping mechanism. And if you would ask me how Israelis are coping right now, it's by helping other people. And somehow I think in our teachings, we need to think a little bit more about how we can think about the ability to help others, not just as a good deed to do, which of course it is, and of course the primary goal is to help others, but also to recognize it as a method of coping, as a method of affirming the meaninglessness of life, as a method of affirming the goodness of life. Because in the face of this tragedy and travesty and the moral questions that we're going to be facing, the ability to do good in the world is a very important coping ritual. And I hope we can take this from not just being good deeds, but to a ritual. So I want to leave you with those 3 challenges about what we can learn from this experience, what I'm seeing here in Israel. And I hope we can continue this conversation as we go along. Again, Rabbi Melanie, Samantha, and everyone here, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Shlomo, Rabbi Brody. We really appreciate your offer to be with us today. Thank you so much for your wisdom and for your partnership. So friends, as we move into the teaching that I'm about to offer today for the next 20 to 30 minutes or so, I invite you to take a deep breath and to get comfortable. Feel free to put chats or thoughts or reactions, some questions or thoughts or reactions in the chat, and I will address them after I finish speaking. So you see the words on the screen, and this is where I'm going to start. There are no words we often hear at times like these. I heard it last week at a vigil here in New York City. And yet Jewish wisdom and contemporary psychology and poetry and song offer us so many words for times like these. Rabbi Earl Grolman of blessed memory, a master of consolation in a time before grief specialists, wrote, "In times of crisis, silence is not golden." I'm going to focus my teaching today on this tension between the idea that there are no words and the reality that there are many, many prescribed words to ground us in some of the Jewish language around death, dying, and grief, along with an exploration of the uses of silence. I'll offer 4 distinct pieces of wisdom, 2 Jewish and 2 secular, asking 4 sets of big questions, 4 questions, with the goal of having you find just one piece among the selection that speaks to you in this moment. Feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the chat throughout, and I will share excerpts from the text that I speak about on the screen. After today's convening, we'll share a source sheet as part of our follow-up to offer this teaching as a resource for you, texts and questions to use in your work. To begin, I want to acknowledge the reality of the unknown number of hostages still held captive, and the moral and religious responsibility we have to free captives. Next, I want to acknowledge the suspended reality, as Shlomo referred to, of the families who have already been notified of their loved ones' deaths, and the impact of the suspended reality on the Jewish people as a whole. Ani Nut, as he spoke about, the Hebrew word for that time between death and burial. One who's in mourning for the dead who have not yet been buried is called an onen, and that person is absolved of mitzvot, of religious responsibilities during this time of Ani Nut. It's assumed that during this time you're in shock as a result of overwhelming grief, and possibly also preoccupied with the logistics and organizational details of burying a loved one. In this horrific situation we, the Jewish people, find ourselves in, the suspended reality, the release from religious obligations for the immediate family members of the dead has become significantly extended because of the complications involved in recovering the bodies, in identifying the bodies, and in preparing burial plots for the bodies, the number simply larger than the capacity of the systems set up for this work. So here's the first piece of wisdom I want to share. In Pirkei Avot, a section of the Mishnah oral law compiled in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, it's a group of conversations the rabbis had after the destruction of the temple about how we're going to live our lives when everything we knew is no longer. It's this section, Pirkei Avot, is largely a work of ethical wisdom. And so here's the quote I want to share. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar taught, "Do not console a person while their deceased is laying in front of them. Do not console a person while their deceased is laying in front of them." Indeed, Jewish law instructs us that the time for mourning begins after burial takes place. Our obligation to console the mourners begins only once burial takes place. So here's the first big question, and I'm grateful to Rabbi Brody for bringing it up. How are we to comport ourselves? How are we to behave toward one who has suffered the death of someone close to them before the funeral has taken place? What are our responsibilities in this liminal moment? Without providing an answer, though I'm grateful to Rabbi Brody for suggesting the idea of chesed as one possible answer, I want to suggest that this concept of the ring theory you see on the screen might be helpful. We at Shomer Collective wrote about it in a resource we created a few months ago with our partners at the Blue Dove Foundation, fabulous Jewish organization doing work nationally here in the US addressing mental health concerns in Jewish communities. We developed this resource to help individuals and professionals respond in the wake of traumatic deaths, such as gun violence or natural disasters, as we imagined it. The ring theory teaches the idea of comfort in and dump out, meaning put the person or people at the center of a crisis in a circle, surrounded by concentric circles, layers of support, one circle after another at a greater remove from the crisis or traumatic death. When the crisis occurs, it's the responsibility of the people in the circle immediately next to the center to provide comfort to those in the center and to turn outward to the next largest circle to seek your own support. Comfort in, meaning provide support to those closer to the center, and dump out or lean out, meaning look to people at an even greater remove for your own support. Pirkei Avot instructs us not to console the people in the center, though, until their dead are buried. So the question remains, how do we who are not in the center circle act toward those in the center while their dead lay before them? Next, moving from Aninu, that period between death and burial, into Avelut, the time after burial in mourning, we count the days, 7 days during Shiva, Shloshim, the first 30 days, and the 11 months plus 1 day counted as a full year of mourning for a parent. The Avel, the mourner, is again exempt from certain things and obligated differently in others. Going to work, saying Kaddish, cutting hair. The details are on a fabulous timeline in a link in the chat. Aninut, Avelut, Shiva, Shloshim, Kaddish. These are the words used to name periods of time and prescribed phases of mourning. When we make a visit to a Shiva home, as Rabbi Brody said, it is customary not to speak to the mourner until they have spoken first. We enter in silence and we sit in silence until the silence is broken only by the mourner. When we leave a Shiva home, it's traditional to say the words, Hamakom Yenachem, may you be comforted among the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, recognizing that mourning is not a solitary experience. May their memory be for a blessing, we say, when we recall one who has died. Zichronam livracha. Min hashamayim tenachumu, the Sfardim say. May you be comforted from the heavens. Mishtatfim b'tzarechem, we join with your sorrow. Baruch dayan ha'emet, blessed is the judge of truth. Plenty of words exist to try to speak to the shock of death. And yet the Torah teaches us that after the deaths of his sons Nadav and Avihu, the ones who brought an unsolicited offering before God, the strange fire, Aaron, their father, was silent by Yidom Aharon. Psychologists suggest that silence is a trauma response. Our colleague Rachel Eitun, founder of an Israeli spiritual care organization called Chaverut, whose mission is to connect those who are facing illness, stress, and loss with spiritual resources to find support through strength, hope, and comfort, writes of this tension between silence and words. She writes, I quote, "It is about deep acceptance and believing in change and transformation." Referring to the horrors of October 7th, she writes, "The rupture is so huge, the disaster is so horrifying that the regular words, the regular sentences don't make any sense. It is time to listen carefully to this frightening silence," she says, as if collecting shattered letters from the ground, searching for words to describe the thoughts, the emotions, the feelings. It will take time to create a new language. It will take time to understand. It will also take time to understand even deeper that we really do not understand anything. Our conversation is about the importance of accepting our own vulnerability, daring to talk about the unspoken, acknowledging brokenness as part of life. I first studied with Rachel in a session she taught at a conference I attended on spiritual care, in which she taught us how through her work, seriously ill patients and their families and their bereaved loved ones transformed everyday medical supplies, things like rubber gloves, cotton swabs, gauze pads, and even the color-coded tops of the vials used to collect blood. They transformed these objects into works of art, murals at the entrances of hospitals in Israel, for example, reclaiming the tools that had been used as part of their traumatic experiences and transforming them into something new, recreating their experiences with these items into something no longer recognizable as solely the instruments used in their care during traumatic experiences. The idea of transforming objects with one intended meaning into something completely different is a tangible way to begin to reclaim one's footing after becoming unmoored by illness or death. It's finding a new use, creating a new language for something that needs to be transformed in order to reclaim its meaning. This idea of transformation reminded me of the writing of the poet Audre Lorde in her book, The Cancer Journals. And so this is the second piece of wisdom I offer. Lorde writes, "I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised and misunderstood. I am still alive and might not have been. Less than 2 months ago," she says, "I was told by 2 doctors that I would have to have breast surgery, and there was a 60 to 80% chance that the tumor was malignant. Between that telling and the actual surgery, there was a 3-week period of agony and an involuntary reorganization of my entire life. The surgery was completed and the growth was benign. But within those 3 weeks, I was forced to look upon myself and my living with a harsh and urgent clarity that has left me still shaken, but much stronger." She writes, "Some of what I experienced during that time has helped elucidate for me much of what I feel concerning the transformation of silence into language and action." She continues, "In becoming forcibly and essentially aware of my mortality and of what I wished and wanted for my life, however short it might be, priorities and omissions became strongly etched in a merciless light. And what I most regretted were my silences. Of what had I ever been afraid? To question or to speak as I believed could have meant pain or death, but we all hurt in so many different ways all the time, and pain will either change or end. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence. I was going to die, if not sooner than later, whether or not I had ever spoken myself. My silences had not protected me. Your silences will not protect you." She asks, "What are the words you do not yet have? What do you need to say?" So that's the second big question I offer today. What do you need to say? Recognizing that our silences may not protect us, in becoming aware of our own mortality, in supporting the people we work with, our clients, our patients, our congregants, our students, in supporting them to become aware of their mortality, what needs to be said? Feel free to share your thoughts in the chat. And so here's the third piece of wisdom I offer today. It's an excerpt from the book, Four Things That Matter Most, a book for living by Dr. Ira Byock, who's a physician specializing in palliative care. He happens to be Jewish. He writes, "There's a saying in my field, it's always too soon until it's too late. Life tends to get better when people can move from leaving important things unsaid to broaching these topics and feeling confident that they've communicated clearly with good intentions to the most important people in their lives. The change is often both remarkably quick and long-lasting. In reality, we live each day just a heartbeat away from eternity. And we're all better off when we don't allow what ifs, could haves, and should haves to arise. It's never too soon," he writes. "Don't wait. Say the four things. Please forgive me. I forgive you. Thank you. I love you." Reading this and preparing over this weekend, my mind immediately went to the text messages published in the media from one of the victims of the massacre at the music festival in Israel, who managed to get a couple of texts to his parents before he was taken captive. He wrote, "I love you, and I'm sorry." How might his loved ones, crushed by his being taken hostage, be helped by seeing those texts? Not merely for the fact of communication in that moment, knowing he's alive, but for the content of the communication. How can we learn from others' dire circumstances to say what needs saying in our own lives before it's too late? How can we help those we work with, our clients, congregants, patients, students, to do this work? So here's the third big question. What feels too soon to say? Really, what feels too soon to say until it feels too late? And so the fourth and last text I want to share with you today is straight from Torah, by way of social media, of course, and it comes from Psalm 77. For those of you who have spent time learning with Shomer Collective, you know that we often ground our study in the teachings of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, the great 20th century theologian. I happen to follow his daughter, Professor Susanna Heschel. She teaches at Dartmouth, on Facebook. I just follow her. In the horrors of last week, one of her posts read simply Psalm 77. When I saw it, I clicked over to Safaria. I'm sure someone will put the link in the chat, even though we didn't queue it. It's a repository of Jewish texts available for free online. So I clicked over to this website and I read the psalm. And I knew from my training as a chaplain and my years in rabbinical school that the book of Psalms is often the go-to for moments of great emotion in need of theological or liturgical response. It's also a helpful text because it speaks to more than one faith. It's contained in the liturgy, not just of Judaism. A number of Psalms begin with strong words suggesting the absence of God and end by coming around to complete faith in God. In my work as a chaplain, I found comfort in the idea that God is with us in our moments of distress, crying alongside us, even if faith is still in doubt. Psalm 77 reads in part, "I cry out to God. I cry that God might listen to me. In my time of distress, I reach my hand out, imploring God. I've been a mess all night, my soul inconsolable. I call God to mind, I moan, I complain, my spirit fails. You have held my eyelids open, I am overwrought, I cannot speak. My thoughts turn to days of old, to years long past. Has God forgotten how to pity? In anger, is God's compassion stifled? I think it's my fault that the right hand of the Most High has changed. But then I recall God's deeds. Yes, I recall your wonders of old. You are the God who works wonders. You have manifested your strength among the peoples. Your way was through the sea, your path through the mighty waters. Your tracks could not be seen. You led your people like a flock in the care of Moses and Aaron." So the psalmist begins with a cry and then is unable to speak. It's that silence in the face of trauma right here in an ancient text that so aptly conveys a truth of the human condition. But eventually the psalmist finds themselves moving beyond questioning God to a realization of their own existence. They find themselves wondering what role they may have played in getting themselves to a place where they're calling out to God and then unable to speak. It's that realization that's the turning point, a recognition of the self that allows the psalmist to remember back before the current crisis to times when God was by their side, creating a path through the unknown toward the promised land. So here's my fourth and final question. Where are you in this moment? In your time of need, what might transform your silence into language and action? In their time of need, what might transform the silence of those you serve into language and action? And so I humbly offer these texts and questions as a response to the idea that there are no words, with the faith that in time, each of us will move through the times that call for silence into language and the action needed for these moments. I'm so grateful to you, Shlomo, for reminding us of the use of chesed in these moments as a way to enact the feelings that we may not have words for. And so to help deepen our thinking about what we each might have to offer, it's my honor to introduce our keynote presenter as planned. Rabbi Adam Lavitt is the Director of Program Design and Facilitation at the Jewish Studio Project, another vital partner of Shomer Collective. He is a spiritual companion, an educator, a writer who's passionate about connecting people with inner and outer sources of wisdom so that we can recognize and act on what matters most to them. Adam has served as a spiritual leader for congregations, college campuses, healthcare settings. He's trained as a spiritual director and a board-certified chaplain. He was ordained at Hebrew College's pluralistic training program in Boston in 2012, where he was also the school's first recipient of a certificate in pastoral care. Adam, I turn things over to you.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be with you all. I'm so grateful to the Shomer Collective for gathering us today. And thank you, Rabbi Levav, for your powerful teachings, just reminding us of how important our work is always, and especially at times like this. So at the risk of giving over more Torah, I'm going to share a few words of Torah to frame this experience for us all, and then invite us into a brief hands-on experience, creating together with whatever you have on hand, that I hope will serve as a resource to ground, connect, and invite that which is bigger and beyond ourselves to accompany us in this time and in our work. As I behold this amazing gathering of folks, some of whom I know and I'm really glad to see here, who are each making unique and important contributions to Jewish end-of-life care, I'm reminded of a particularly powerful moment in my previous role as a geriatric chaplain. A fellow chaplain from hospice asked me to help her run a blessing circle, an opportunity for a resident's family to share fond memories with her while she was still conscious. Exactly this, of gratitude, forgiveness, love, as Melanie just offered. As I prepared, the music therapist set up the link for our meeting. The community life manager brought me an iPad to use to bring in the family that was Zooming in, and then directed me to a nurse who gave me a face shield. This was more toward the height of pandemic. After I clumsily cut my finger opening the packaging of the face shield, the nurse disinfected my cut, gave me a Band-Aid, and helped us find a room we could gather in. While none of these moments may sound especially remarkable, looking back on this, we all were working with what we had on hand to create a sacred space in which this resident's family could ultimately gather together in person and from afar to share their hopes and memories with this beloved mother, grandmother, aunt, and sister. By the time we started the meeting, the room was overflowing. I think we could all feel this, not just with the love of the family who was there and calling in for this resident, for this woman, but with the unique contributions of so many others. And that's also what I sense here today. The power of the creative contributions, big and small, that we all make through the work that we do to form sacred moments like that. In a field so often marginalized, in which many of us may frequently feel alone, unseen perhaps, the deep joy of coming face to face with all the brilliant, creative, visionary folks laboring alongside us to deepen, grow, and tend to this crucial aspect of living, dying well, is just so palpable and important. And I'm really feeling that here today, and hope you all are as well. In a famous verse in Exodus, God instructs the Israelites to build a sacred space that will travel with them as they wander in the wilderness and be a meeting place between them and their God. Ve'asuli mikdash v'shechanti betocham. Let them make me a mikdash, a sacred space. God says, that I may be with them, that I may dwell among them. These words suggest there's some kind of connection between the act of creating a sacred space and our own experience of presence, of connection as we create that space. None of us are just doing a job, right? The work we do resonates in a deeply personal way. To do what each of us does, we need to sense the connection between our soul, the deeper part of us that gives us a sense of meaning and purpose, and our role, how we show up, the daily tasks that comprise our work, right? Today, I want to offer us an experience of doing this by reflecting on what we bring to the creative work of constructing this mikdash, this sacred space of Jewish end-of-life care. Right? How do we do our work with a sense of wholeheartedness and presence, even and perhaps especially when our hearts are broken? What role does creativity play in the way we bring our gifts to this field? So as Rabbi Levav taught earlier, there's such power in engaging with words, but also in letting the words fall away and moving into action. So let's just take a moment to notice what really resonated for us from these conversations, from the text study we just did. And in a moment, we'll engage in a 10-minute creative spiritual practice to open up the texts we just explored in another more embodied way of knowing. You don't have to have any creative experience. This will be very guided. If you do have a lot of creative experience, you can bring that to bear on this. It'll just be a beginning if you want to keep working beyond these 10 minutes outside of our time together. So this practice will involve creating with materials. Any materials will do. And you can think of each step of this process as a kind of embodied meditation, really just tuning into the sensory experience of being in our bodies, working with the materials in front of us, sitting here together. So grab a piece of paper if you don't already have one and something to draw with. It can be your kids' Crayola markers, highlighters from your desk, a number 2 pencil, ballpoint pen, your favorite watercolor set, if you happen to have that handy. Whatever you have on hand is just right for this time. At Jewish Studio Project, we approach materials with the understanding we're all created creative. And we all have capacity to work with the materials in front of us, around us. So we'll begin by drawing a heart in any way we like. It can be anatomical if you're able to do that. It could just be like a Valentine sort of heart. And we'll use this as our grounding object. Don't think about it too hard, just creating the shape. And I'm doing this with you as well. And for the next few minutes, we're going to create, embellish within and outside the heart, making marks on the page in whatever way is enticing, is pleasing to us, in whatever way draws our attention and our senses to it, right? And this isn't about doing anything beautifully or in a way that you're going to frame or hang on your wall. You can do that certainly. But really the invitation here is to be with your experience of creating, not thinking about it, just noticing where the energy is taking you, tuning into the somatic experience, the sensations of working with materials, with colors, with textures, with whatever you have as you draw inside and outside the heart. I'll hold our shared studio space by playing a song and invite you to let the music of Rabbi Ariel Wolpe carry us as we each are in our own space, alone together, grounding in this moment, creating that which has never existed before. We'll have about 3 minutes like this, and then I'll bring us back. And to say, if you want to tilt your screen so we can each be in this virtual studio together, just seeing each other's hands move, feel invited, but in no way obligated to do so. Okay, so here we go. Nothing to think about for these next few minutes, just making marks on the page.
Havaya mimamakim keraticha mimamakim keraticha Havaya mimamakim keraticha Adonai Shim'a b'koli Tiyena osnecha Kashuva lekol tachanunai Adonai Shim'a b'koli Tiyena osnecha Kashuva lekol tachanunai Mimamakim keraticha Havaya keraticha mimamakim keraticha Havaya mimamakim keraticha Adonai Shim'a b'koli Tiyena oznecha Kashuva lekol tachanunai Adonai Shim'a b'koli Tiyena oznecha Kashuva lekol tachanunai Mimamakim 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 keraticha Havaya Mimamakim keraticha Mimamakim keraticha Mimamakim keraticha
In the next few moments, coming to that comfortable or uncomfortable stopping place for now, knowing you can return again to this piece at another time if you feel so called. The invitation now is to place your piece in front of you. We're going to move into something we at Jewish Studio Project call witness writing, a way of really coming into direct relationship with what's been created, noticing what it might have to say to you at this time. So with your piece before you, find a pen and paper and begin just for about a minute here to describe what you see, what you notice as you look at what's in front of you. And then adding to this, if this piece had something to say about the state of your heart, what would your piece have to say? maybe I'm energized by the way I get to show up, or my heart is heavy, and my work is a welcome or maybe unwelcome distraction. Whatever it is that your piece has to say about the state of your heart. And finally, ask yourself, what does my heart need to feel supported in the sacred work I do? What does my heart need in order to feel supported in the sacred work I do? Writing a sentence or two here, really just reflecting on that. We begin to arc to a close here, letting those words continue to be woven into the chat. I want to invite us to just take a moment now to create a collective gallery. So you might, if you haven't already, set your Zoom view to gallery view. And the invitation here is to hold up our pieces to the screen just for a moment together, so we can not necessarily see every piece, but see that we all did this together, and each in our own unique way. And we're all connected through this work of creating. So this is really beautiful. Wow. You can just scroll through the Zoom, see this gathering here and how each person has created in their own way. Thank you so much. So I hope this experience just helped you reconnect with your creative capacity, with something that I think is applicable, so deeply applicable to our work. And that's really reinforced by this kind of process, that we are able to work with whatever materials are available to us in whatever contexts, with whatever people are around us. It doesn't mean it's always easy or filled with light. And there's something to be said for the depth of the connections we're able to make by working with what's here. And I just want to bless us with the blessings that you've all brought here. Presence, connection, finding connection in the brokenness, gratitude, bringing in some of your words here too. Community, time, space to decompress and be open. So I hope you found some of that here. And I just really appreciate everything you brought to our time together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi Adam, for your beautiful, beautiful offering. You have added so much to our work, and we are grateful. I just want to name the music that you chose, the words that came after the nigun, after the wordless part. From the depths, I call out to you, and captured so beautifully where so many of us have found ourselves in the depths and finding a way to call out, to connect with our hearts, to connect here. Really, really beautiful offering, and I'm so grateful. And so I want to say, as we move toward closing our time together, please know that lifting up your work, elevating your work, is a vital part of what we seek to do at Shomer Collective. To elevate the collective work we're all doing in helping people to live well, knowing that tomorrow is never guaranteed. And I want to express my profound gratitude to each of you for making the time to be with us here today and for the work that you do or the work that you're planning to do. I saw a number of you signed up to become death doulas, not yet in the work, but on your way. And I want to close with a quote from a new book. I haven't yet read the whole thing, but I've heard bits and pieces and read some snippets. It was published just this year by Colin Campbell. And the book is called Finding the Words. Some of you may be familiar with his work. Campbell's 2 teenage children were killed by a drunk driver in an accident that he and his wife survived. And he writes, I quote, "Many of us who have suffered a profound loss feel a desire to be of service to others. We want to help our community. We want to make our lives matter." End quote. It reminds me very much of where we started with Rabbi Shlomo at the beginning, this idea of chesed, of caring for others, that desire to move from and through the profound feelings of loss to be of service to others. And so may we who serve our communities be blessed, each of us and collectively, as we transform our personal and communal losses into work that matters. Thank you, everyone.